watch it?
Hi, Mr. President.
Congratulations. Not, yeah, I will see it on the news.
Hi, Mr. President, congratulations, Melania Trump says on the phone, speaking from a golden bathroom in the first trailer for Melania, Amazon MGM Studios' upcoming documentary about the First Lady. Did you watch it? Donald Trump asks on the other end of the call. I did not, I will see it on the news, she replies. It's clear Melania, who also produces the film, isn't afraid to poke a little fun at herself. Directed by Brett Ratner, also a somewhat polarizing figure, the film is due for release in theaters on January 30, 2026, with the trailer inviting audiences to witness history in the making, following Melania as she has 20 days to become First Lady of the United States of America. Everybody wants to know, so here it is, she later offers amid an assortment of clips following her as she walks around the White House, boards Air Force One, speaks to world dignitaries, looks glamorous in a variety of outfits and generally goes about her First Lady duties. Perhaps unsurprisingly, sunglasses and stilettos have significant supporting roles throughout. According to the official description, the film offers unprecedented access to the 20 days leading up to the 2025 presidential inauguration, through the eyes of the First Lady-elect herself. Amazon MGM also invites viewers to step inside Melania Trump's world as she orchestrates inauguration plans, navigates the complexities of the White House transition, and re-enters public life with her family. The studio said it has exclusive footage of critical meetings and private conversations. Amazon reportedly paid a staggering $40 million for rights to the film. Its founder Jeff Bezos was one of several tech titans who made a point of making the trek to DC to attend Donald Trump's inauguration. Melania will stream on Prime Video following its theatrical run. In addition, the studio said there will be an accompanying 3-part docuseries, which will follow Melania Trump as she is ferried between Trump Tower in New York City, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach and Washington, D.C., where her husband assumed power after winning the 2024 presidential election. Ratner hasn't worked on a major Hollywood production since 2017 when he was accused of misconduct by 6 women in a Los Angeles Times expose. However, he's reportedly set to return to his Rush Hour action series with a 4th installment now in the works at Paramount, a move that came after Donald Trump personally requested that the studio revive the franchise. In 2026, cinema turns its lens toward one of the most enigmatic public figures of the modern era. Melania is not just a biographical drama, it is a study of silence, image, power, and the cost of living inside history while being watched by the entire world. Unlike traditional political films that focus on speeches, policies, or scandals, Melania, 2026, chooses a quieter path. It explores the inner life of a woman whose public presence was often minimal, yet endlessly scrutinized. This film asks a bold question: what happens when a person becomes a symbol against their own will? In this video, we will explore everything about Melania, 2026, from its background and inspiration, to its themes, performances, cinematography, symbolism, controversies, critical reception, and deeper meanings you may have missed. So settle in, because this is not just a movie review. This is a cinematic deep dive. Melania, 2026, emerged during a period when Hollywood began re-examining real figures not as heroes or villains, but as psychologically complex individuals. The filmmakers reportedly approached the project less as a political statement and more as a human portrait. Rather than adapting a single book, the screenplay draws inspiration from a wide range of public records, interviews, fashion history, media coverage, and historical moments. The creators were clear in stating that this is a dramatized interpretation, not a documentary. The development phase was lengthy. Multiple drafts of the script were written to strike a balance between historical familiarity and emotional privacy. One of the core challenges was deciding what not to show, a choice that ultimately defines the film's tone. The production team consulted cultural historians, body language experts, and fashion archivists to ensure authenticity in visual storytelling. Costumes play a crucial narrative role, often communicating what dialogue intentionally withholds. The film unfolds across multiple timelines, blending past and present to create a layered narrative. We see fragments of early ambition, moments of transformation, and the slow tightening of public expectation. Rather than following a traditional rise and fall arc, Melania presents life as a series of transitions, countries crossed, identities reshaped, and roles accepted without full consent. Key scenes are often quiet, walking through hallways, preparing for public appearances, watching news coverage alone, or standing beside history while remaining emotionally distant from it. Dialogue is sparse, but deliberate. Long pauses, reflective gazes, and carefully framed silences allow the audience to project their own interpretations. The film refuses to tell viewers what to think. This structure may challenge viewers expecting a conventional biopic, but it rewards patience with emotional resonance. Silence as power. One of the film's strongest themes is silence, not as weakness, but as survival. The character's restraint becomes a form of control in a world demanding constant reaction. Identity versus image. The film repeatedly contrasts private identity with public image. Mirrors, reflections, and glass surfaces are used to suggest fragmentation. Immigration and reinvention. Subtle visual cues emphasize displacement and reinvention. Language barriers, cultural contrasts, and isolation are ever present but never overstated. Fashion as language. Wardrobe choices act as emotional armor. Color palettes shift depending on setting, signaling internal states without explicit explanation. The lead performance is restrained, controlled, and intentionally opaque. This is a role built on micro-expressions rather than monologues. The actor avoids imitation and instead offers interpretation, capturing posture, rhythm, and emotional distance rather than surface mimicry. Supporting performances are deliberately understated, often orbiting the protagonist without fully connecting, reinforcing the film's emotional isolation. Visually, Melania is elegant and minimalist. Static shots dominate, emphasizing containment and formality. The color grading transitions from warm tones in early life sequences to colder, desaturated palettes in later periods. The director favors natural light, long takes, and off-center framing, placing the protagonist slightly outside the visual balance, symbolizing emotional displacement. The score is sparse and atmospheric. Piano motifs recur during moments of reflection, while silence is frequently used as a sound design choice. Ambient sounds, footsteps, camera shutters, distant applause replace traditional musical cues, grounding the film in realism. As expected, the film sparked debate. Some critics praised its subtlety, while others found it emotionally distant. Political audiences were divided, with some accusing the film of neutrality, and others appreciating its refusal to moralize. The filmmakers responded by emphasizing that the film's purpose was observation, not judgment. Critics largely agreed on one thing: Melania is not designed for mass appeal. It is a slow, contemplative film that values mood over momentum. Performances and cinematography received the most praise, while pacing was the most common criticism. The film found particular appreciation among international audiences and film festival circles. Melania, 2026, is a film about observation, about watching someone who has been watched for decades. It does not seek to explain, justify, or condemn. Instead, it asks the audience to sit with ambiguity. Whether you find it fascinating or frustrating may depend on what you expect from cinema itself. This is not a loud movie. It is a quiet one, and that is precisely its point. Melania, 2026, is directed by Brett Ratner, a filmmaker known for handling high-profile, visually polished productions. In this project, Ratner adopts a restrained and observational approach, stepping away from spectacle and instead focusing on intimacy, symbolism, and atmosphere. His direction emphasizes visual storytelling over dialogue, allowing moments, expressions, and environments to communicate meaning. The film's controlled pacing and composed framing reflect a deliberate choice to let the audience observe rather than be instructed, reinforcing the documentary drama hybrid tone of the project. Rather than relying on a traditional scripted narrative, the film's writing approach is largely shaped by real-world presence and structured observation. The narrative unfolds through curated moments, public appearances, and reflective sequences, blending factual material with cinematic interpretation. This method allows the film to remain grounded in reality while still crafting a cohesive emotional arc. The absence of overt dramatization reinforces the film's emphasis on authenticity and personal perspective. At the center of the film is Melania Trump, appearing as herself in her role as First Lady. Her presence anchors the narrative, offering rare access to moments both public and private. The film also features notable figures from fashion, diplomacy, religion, and global leadership, including Donald Trump, appearing as President of the United States, and Brigitte Macron and Queen Rania, each representing international First Lady diplomacy and public duty. Family perspectives are subtly included through appearances by Barron Trump and Victor Noves, grounding the film in personal context. Religious and ceremonial moments are represented by Monsignor Joseph P. Lamort and Father Enrique Salvo, emphasizing the role of faith and tradition. Designers, creatives, and cultural figures such as Hervé Pierre, Adam Lips, and Regine Maho provide insight into image crafting, presentation, and the unspoken language of fashion and appearance. The film is produced by an experienced team led by Mark Beckman, Brett Ratner, and Fernando Solican, with Melania Trump herself serving as a producer. This involvement suggests a project shaped from within rather than from an external political lens. Co-producers Maximilian Arvelaez and Kasia Niemann support the production with coordination and execution, ensuring consistency across the film's international settings and logistical complexity. The original score is composed by Tony Neiman, whose music remains subtle and atmospheric throughout the film. Rather than dominating scenes, the score enhances emotional undercurrents, often receding into silence when moments demand restraint. Guitar contributions by Simone Sayo add texture and warmth, complementing the film's reflective tone and reinforcing its emotional minimalism. One of the film's strongest technical achievements lies in its cinematography, handled by Jeff Cronenweth, Barry Peterson, and Dante Spinati. Together, they create a visual language defined by controlled lighting, elegant composition, and deliberate stillness. The camera often observes from a respectful distance, emphasizing isolation, formality, and public scrutiny. The cinematography reinforces the film's themes of visibility and separation, making the visual experience as expressive as the narrative itself. Edited by Alex Marquez, the film maintains a steady, contemplative rhythm. The editing avoids rapid cuts, allowing scenes to breathe and emotions to linger. Assistant editors Leah Gunter, Ricardo Sanchez, Wendy Sitt, and Celinda Zhou contribute to a seamless narrative flow, ensuring continuity across timelines and locations. The result is a film that feels composed rather than assembled. Sound plays a critical role in shaping the film's immersive quality. Led by sound designers Wiley Stateman and Tatiana Freen, the audio landscape blends ambient sound, silence, and restrained musical cues. Multiple sound mixers, including Matthew Caulfield, John Hollis, Lemuel Ruiz, and others, ensure clarity across environments ranging from ceremonial halls to private interiors. The sound design reinforces realism, often allowing natural sounds, footsteps, applause, camera shutters, to replace traditional scoring. An extensive camera and electrical team supports the film's polished visual style. Operators, assistants, and technicians handle everything from Steadicam movement to drone photography, ensuring visual consistency across diverse locations. The presence of fashion photographer Ellen von Unwerth adds a refined aesthetic sensibility, particularly in portrait-style framing and still compositions that echo editorial photography. Behind the scenes, a dedicated production staff manages logistics, translation, and coordination. Samuel Bachoven oversees translation management, reflecting the film's international scope, while production assistants and supervisors ensure smooth execution. These contributions, though rarely visible on screen, are essential to maintaining the film's precision and global continuity. Public and audience reactions to Melania, 2026. When Melania, 2026, was released, it immediately became one of the most debated films of the year, not because of explosive storytelling or technical innovation, but because of the extraordinary divide in how people responded to it. Rarely does a film generate such sharply opposing reactions across critics, casual viewers, and online communities. In many ways, the conversation around Melania has become larger than the film itself. At its core, Melania, 2026, is a quiet, controlled, and carefully composed cinematic portrait. However, that very restraint is what sparked strong reactions. For some viewers, the film's subtlety felt thoughtful and dignified. For others, it felt empty, guarded, and deliberately unrevealing. As a result, the movie exists at the center of cultural debate rather than purely within cinematic discussion. A film that divided opinion instantly. From its opening weekend, it was clear that Melania was not going to receive a neutral reception. Audiences entered theaters with strong pre-existing opinions, shaped by years of media exposure, political identity, and public perception of its subject. This meant that many viewers were not simply watching a movie, they were responding to a symbol. Some audience members praised the film for its calm tone and polished presentation. They described it as respectful, elegant, and emotionally composed. To them, the film offered a rare chance to observe a public figure outside the noise of headlines and controversy. These viewers felt that the movie captured dignity through silence and suggested strength through restraint. Others, however, left the film frustrated. They felt that the movie avoided difficult questions, offered little emotional access, and presented a version of reality that felt carefully managed. For these viewers, the film did not deepen understanding, it reinforced distance. The critics' perspective. Professional critics were largely unified in their response, and that response leaned heavily negative. Many reviewers argued that the film lacked a clear narrative drive. Instead of building tension or revealing character depth, they felt the movie drifted through scenes without providing insight or discovery. A common criticism was that the film seemed overly cautious. Reviewers noted that while the camera is often close to its subject, the storytelling never truly penetrates beyond surface moments. Critics described the experience as watching a beautifully arranged sequence of events that never fully connects into a meaningful story. Several reviewers also pointed out that the film does not challenge its subject. There is little interrogation, little contrast, and almost no critical distance. For critics expecting a documentary or biographical film to offer reflection or examination, this approach felt unsatisfying. Instead of revealing complexity, they felt the film protected its subject too carefully. Another recurring critique focused on pacing. The slow rhythm, long pauses, and minimal dialogue were seen by some as artistic choices, but by many critics as signs of a lack of substance. They argued that silence, when overused, stops feeling intentional and begins to feel like avoidance. Audience reactions: support, skepticism, and emotion. While critics largely dismissed the film, parts of the audience reacted very differently. Supportive viewers emphasized emotional tone rather than narrative depth. They described the film as calming, reflective, and visually graceful. For them, the movie was not meant to explain or justify, it was meant to observe. Some audience members connected with the portrayal of isolation and pressure. They interpreted the quiet moments not as emptiness, but as emotional burden. To these viewers, the film communicated what it feels like to live under constant scrutiny while maintaining composure. There were also viewers who appreciated the film precisely because it avoided confrontation. They saw it as a personal portrait rather than an investigation. For them, the absence of controversy was a feature, not a flaw. However, many general viewers echoed the critics' dissatisfaction. Online discussions reveal that a large portion of audiences found the film boring, repetitive, or emotionally inaccessible. They felt that very little happens across the runtime and that the movie ends without leaving a strong impression. Some viewers described the film as more similar to a promotional piece than a documentary. Others compared it to an extended fashion or lifestyle montage, visually refined but narratively thin. The great ratings divide. One of the most unusual aspects of Melania, 2026, is the extreme contrast in ratings across platforms. On some sites, the film appears overwhelmingly disliked. On others, it shows unusually high audience approval. This contrast itself became a major talking point. Supporters argue that this divide reflects mistrust of professional critics. They believe reviewers approached the film with bias and dismissed it without engaging sincerely. From this perspective, high audience approval is seen as a rejection of critical authority rather than an endorsement of cinematic quality alone. Skeptics, however, question whether all positive audience ratings reflect genuine reactions. They point to patterns in online voting and promotional behavior as reasons to doubt the authenticity of some responses. This debate has fueled endless online arguments, transforming the film into a case study in modern media polarization. Online discourse and cultural context. On social media platforms and discussion forums, Melania has inspired thousands of posts, threads, and debates. Some users defend the film passionately, framing criticism as politically motivated. Others mock the movie as empty spectacle, arguing that it exists only to reinforce an image rather than tell a story. What becomes clear in these discussions is that many people are not reacting to the film itself, but to what it represents. Opinions about Melania, 2026, often align closely with broader views on politics, media trust, and cultural identity. This makes it difficult to separate cinematic evaluation from ideological response. In many conversations, film language gives way to political language, and storytelling criticism turns into cultural commentary. Why the film feels so polarizing? The intense division around Melania can be traced to several factors. First, the subject is already deeply polarizing. Any portrayal, no matter how neutral, is likely to provoke strong reactions. Second, the film's creative approach invites interpretation. By withholding commentary and explanation, it leaves space for viewers to project their own beliefs. This openness can feel powerful to some and evasive to others. Third, the modern media environment amplifies extremes. Positive reactions become louder, negative reactions become sharper, and moderate opinions are often drowned out. As a result, the film exists in an echo chamber of strong feelings. What the film ultimately represents. Regardless of one's opinion, Melania, 2026, has secured a unique place in contemporary cinema. It is less remembered for its plot or technique and more for the conversation it sparked. The film has become a mirror, reflecting how audiences engage with public figures, truth, and storytelling in a polarized world. For some, it is a graceful and restrained portrait. For others, it is a missed opportunity. But almost no one views it as insignificant. In the end, Melania, 2026, may not be judged by traditional standards of success or failure. Its impact lies in how strongly it reveals the divisions in audience expectation, media trust, and cultural interpretation. Whether admired or criticized, it has become a defining example of how a film can exist at the intersection of cinema, identity, and public debate. Financial breakdown of Melania, 2026 box office, spending, and economic impact. The release of Melania, 2026, marked a rare moment in modern cinema when a documentary carried the financial expectations of a major studio feature. Long before audiences saw the film, industry insiders were already discussing its economics, not because documentaries typically command attention in this way, but because Melania was produced and marketed on an unprecedented scale. Unlike most nonfiction films, which are often modestly budgeted and rely on critical acclaim or awards momentum, Melania entered theaters backed by corporate-level funding and global distribution power. This alone made its financial journey unusual and controversial. Production costs, a documentary like no other. At the heart of the film's financial story is its production investment. Reports indicate that the rights to produce and distribute Melania, 2026, were secured for a sum rarely, if ever, seen in the documentary space. The acquisition alone reportedly reached tens of millions of dollars, placing it far above the cost of most nonfiction projects. To put this into perspective, many documentaries are made for under $1 million, and even high-profile titles often remain below $10 million. Melania, however, was positioned more like a prestige biographical feature than a traditional documentary, with an emphasis on cinematic production values, international filming, and high-level creative talent. These factors contributed to production expenses that included travel across multiple countries, high-end cinematography teams, original musical scoring, extensive post-production work, and carefully curated visual presentation. All of this pushed the overall production cost into territory normally reserved for scripted films. Marketing expenditures, heavy promotion on a rare scale. Beyond production, marketing became one of the largest financial components of the project. The promotional campaign for Melania, 2026, was unusually aggressive for a documentary. Advertising appeared across television, digital platforms, billboards, and cinema previews, ensuring that the film reached both politically engaged audiences and general moviegoers. Marketing experts estimate that tens of millions of dollars were spent on promotion alone. This included targeted advertising in major cities, online campaigns designed to generate conversation, and strategic placements meant to position the film as a cultural event rather than a niche release. Such spending is uncommon in nonfiction cinema, where word of mouth and festival buzz typically drive attention. In this case, the distributors chose visibility over subtlety, signaling that the film was expected to perform at a level comparable to mainstream theatrical releases. Opening weekend performance. When Melania debuted in theaters, its opening weekend became a focal point of discussion. The film generated several $1 million in ticket sales during its first few days, placing it among the strongest documentary openings in recent years. For a non-fiction title, this was a noteworthy achievement. Many documentaries struggle to secure wide theatrical distribution at all, let alone generate substantial opening revenue. From that standpoint, the initial performance could be considered a success. However, expectations were higher because of the enormous financial investment behind the project. When measured against its production and marketing costs, the opening weekend revenue represented only a small fraction of what would be needed to recover expenses through theatrical exhibition alone. Domestic versus international earnings. The majority of Melania's box office revenue came from domestic theaters. In the United States, interest was fueled by media coverage, political relevance, and curiosity surrounding the subject. Attendance was strongest in urban areas and regions with higher engagement in political or cultural commentary. Internationally, however, the film's performance was far more limited. In several overseas markets, ticket sales were modest, with low per-screen averages and short theatrical runs. This highlighted a key challenge for politically centered documentaries: their appeal often does not translate universally across borders. While global audiences may recognize the subject, the emotional and cultural relevance of the film proved strongest within the U.S. market. As a result, international box office revenue contributed only a small portion of the film's overall theatrical earnings. Total box office revenue. As the film completed its theatrical run, total box office earnings worldwide reached a figure that, while respectable for a documentary, fell far short of the project's total investment. Even when combining domestic and international revenue, theatrical income covered only a small percentage of production and marketing costs. It's important to note that box office revenue is not returned entirely to the studio. A significant portion remains with theater operators, meaning the actual amount received by the distributor is lower than gross ticket sales suggest. This further widened the gap between earnings and expenses. From a traditional financial standpoint, Melania, 2026, did not come close to breaking even through theatrical release alone. Financial controversies and public debate. As financial data emerged, controversy followed. Online discussions questioned attendance figures, with some observers pointing to reports of sparsely populated screenings despite strong ticket sales numbers. This led to speculation about bulk ticket purchases or coordinated promotional efforts. While no definitive evidence confirmed widespread manipulation, the debate itself reflected the charged environment surrounding the film. Financial performance became entangled with political identity, leading many discussions to focus less on economics and more on ideology. Regardless of perception, reported box office figures were tracked through standard industry systems, meaning the revenue was legitimate in terms of accounting. However, the public skepticism underscored how unusual the film's financial story had become. Why box office was never the only goal. Despite the apparent theatrical underperformance, many analysts argue that Melania was never intended to succeed solely through ticket sales. The film was produced and distributed by a company with significant streaming infrastructure, suggesting that theatrical release was only one phase of a broader content strategy. In this context, theaters served as a branding platform, establishing visibility, generating headlines, and positioning the film as a high-value property before its digital release. Once available for streaming, the documentary could reach a much larger audience without the limitations of physical theaters. Streaming viewership, licensing deals, and long-term digital availability may ultimately provide value that is not immediately reflected in box office numbers. For large media companies, such indirect benefits can justify losses in one area if they strengthen the platform as a whole. Comparison to other documentaries. When compared to most documentaries, Melania, 2026, exists in a category of its own. Few nonfiction films receive such extensive funding or promotion. While many acclaimed documentaries earn far less at the box office, they also cost far less to produce. In that sense, Melania challenges traditional definitions of success and failure in documentary cinema. Financially, it underperformed relative to its spending. Culturally, however, it dominated conversation, news coverage, and online debate. Long-term financial outlook. The long-term financial impact of Melania remains difficult to measure. Revenue from streaming, international licensing, and future media deals may continue to generate returns over time. Additionally, the film's role in driving subscriptions or platform engagement could hold indirect value. From a strict accounting perspective, the theatrical release alone does not justify the expense. But from a strategic content standpoint, the film may still serve broader corporate objectives that extend beyond immediate profit. Final assessment. The financial story of Melania, 2026, is one of extremes. It combined record-level spending with moderate box office returns, creating a gap rarely seen in documentary filmmaking. While its theatrical earnings were significant by nonfiction standards, they were insufficient relative to its unprecedented costs. Ultimately, Melania stands as a case study in how modern media companies approach content not just as entertainment, but as cultural influence. Its box office numbers tell only part of the story. The rest lies in visibility, discussion, and long-term digital presence. Whether viewed as a financial miscalculation or a strategic investment, Melania, 2026, has permanently altered expectations about what a documentary can cost, how it can be marketed, and how success is defined in the age of streaming. Melania, 2026, is a feature-length documentary that presents an intimate yet carefully controlled portrait of Melania Trump, focusing on her life, public role, and personal journey before, during, and after her time as First Lady of the United States. Rather than functioning as a political exposé or investigative biography, the film adopts a restrained observational approach, prioritizing mood, imagery, and presence over confrontation or analysis. The documentary aims to show how Melania Trump experiences life within one of the most scrutinized positions in the modern world, while maintaining emotional distance and privacy. The documentary opens quietly, establishing its tone immediately. There is no dramatic narration or historical montage. Instead, the camera follows Melania Trump through routine moments, preparing for public appearances, walking through formal interiors, and observing events from the sidelines. These early scenes signal that the film is not interested in spectacle but in atmosphere. The pacing is slow, deliberate, and reflective, encouraging viewers to observe rather than judge. From the beginning, silence plays a crucial role. Long pauses, minimal dialogue, and lingering shots allow the audience to project meaning onto Melania's expressions and movements. The absence of heavy narration reinforces the idea that this is a portrait, not an argument. As the documentary progresses, it introduces Melania's early life in Europe. Through archival visuals, photographs, and reflective commentary, the film traces her upbringing in Slovenia, emphasizing themes of discipline, ambition, and independence. These sections highlight her early interest in fashion, modeling, and international travel, framing her as someone accustomed to reinvention and adaptation. The film does not dwell heavily on hardship or trauma. Instead, it portrays her early life as structured and aspirational, focusing on her transition from a small European country to global modeling circuits. This phase of the documentary reinforces a recurring theme, transformation through environment rather than personal confession. The documentary then shifts toward Melania's entrance into the American public sphere. This transition is portrayed visually rather than verbally. The camera contrasts earlier, more intimate settings with grand architectural spaces, formal gatherings, and media-heavy environments. Rather than narrating events in detail, the film shows how Melania adapts to increasingly public roles. Scenes emphasize posture, presentation, and restraint. She is often shown observing rather than engaging, listening rather than speaking. This visual language suggests a deliberate emotional boundary between her private self and public image. The central portion of the documentary focuses on Melania Trump's time as First Lady. These sequences form the emotional and structural core of the film. The White House is depicted as both majestic and isolating. Wide shots emphasize scale and formality, while close-ups suggest quiet moments of contemplation. Public events, state visits, ceremonies, and official appearances are shown without commentary. The camera captures the choreography of protocol, fashion choices, and nonverbal communication. The documentary presents Melania as someone navigating a role shaped by tradition while existing within a highly polarized political climate. Notably, the film avoids direct engagement with political controversy. Instead of addressing policies or scandals, it focuses on how public scrutiny affects personal experience. Media coverage appears in the background, often through television screens or distant audio, reinforcing the sense that external narratives are always present but never fully confronted. Melania's marriage to Donald Trump is depicted carefully and selectively. The documentary does not explore intimate relationship dynamics in detail. Instead, it shows moments of public partnership, standing together at events, traveling internationally, and sharing formal appearances. These scenes emphasize contrast. Donald Trump is often portrayed as outward-facing and vocal, while Melania remains composed and reserved. The film does not comment on this contrast explicitly, leaving interpretation to the viewer. This approach aligns with the documentary's overall refusal to analyze motives or emotions directly. The documentary briefly addresses Melania's role as a mother, particularly through scenes involving Barron Trump. These moments are presented with restraint, avoiding sentimentality. The camera maintains respectful distance, underscoring privacy rather than emotional exposure. Motherhood is framed as a grounding force rather than a defining narrative. It is shown as one aspect of Melania's identity, not the central focus. This reinforces the documentary's theme that individuals cannot be reduced to single roles, even when those roles dominate public perception. Another major section of the film highlights Melania's role on the international stage. State visits and meetings with global leaders are shown as carefully orchestrated performances of diplomacy. Fashion, body language, and ceremonial gestures take center stage. Figures such as Brigitte Macron and Queen Rania appear within this context, representing shared experiences among women in global leadership roles. These moments emphasize mutual understanding without explicit dialogue. The documentary uses visual parallels to suggest solidarity rather than stating it outright. Throughout the film, fashion functions as a silent language. The documentary repeatedly returns to wardrobe selection, fittings, and preparations before public appearances. Designers and stylists appear briefly, explaining how clothing choices are shaped by context, symbolism, and protocol. Rather than presenting fashion as vanity, the film frames it as armor and communication. Color palettes, silhouettes, and materials are used to convey mood and intent. These details become an extension of Melania's voice within a system that limits verbal expression. As the documentary moves forward, it increasingly emphasizes the weight of public judgment. News footage, headlines, and commentary appear intermittently, often without sound. This visual strategy suggests constant observation without allowing those voices to dominate the narrative. The film portrays media scrutiny as omnipresent but distant. Melania is shown watching coverage rather than responding to it. This reinforces the theme of controlled distance, being seen without being heard, discussed without participating. One of the documentary's most striking elements is its portrayal of isolation. Despite being surrounded by people, security, and ceremony, Melania is often framed alone within vast spaces. Long corridors, large rooms, and empty halls dominate the visual language. These images suggest emotional solitude rather than physical loneliness. The film implies that maintaining privacy in such a public role requires deliberate withdrawal. Silence becomes a form of self-preservation rather than absence. In its later sections, the documentary shifts tone slightly. The pace remains slow, but the imagery becomes softer. The focus moves away from institutional settings toward quieter, more personal environments. Rather than offering explicit reflection or commentary, the film allows moments of stillness to speak. There is a sense of transition, of stepping away from constant scrutiny while remaining shaped by it. The documentary concludes without a definitive statement. There is no summary narration or concluding argument. Instead, the final scenes return to quiet observation, Melania walking, preparing, and existing within spaces that no longer demand constant performance. The absence of closure is intentional. The film ends as it began, without explanation, judgment, or emotional resolution. This reinforces the idea that public figures are never fully knowable, and that silence can be both shield and statement. Melania, 2026, is not a documentary that seeks to persuade or reveal hidden truths. It is a film about presence, perception, and restraint. Its greatest strength, and greatest source of criticism, is its refusal to engage directly with controversy. Supporters see the film as a dignified portrait of a woman navigating extraordinary circumstances with composure. Critics argue that it avoids meaningful exploration and protects its subject too carefully. Both interpretations stem from the same creative choices. Ultimately, the documentary functions as a meditation on identity in the public eye. It asks viewers not what they think of Melania Trump, but how much anyone can truly know about a person defined by image and expectation. As a complete work, Melania, 2026, stands apart from conventional political or biographical documentaries. It prioritizes mood over message, observation over explanation, and silence over statement. Whether viewers find this approach profound or frustrating depends on what they seek from nonfiction cinema. What is undeniable is that the documentary leaves a lasting impression, not through dramatic revelations, but through the quiet tension between visibility and privacy. In doing so, it becomes less a story about politics and more a study of modern public life itself. The documentary Melania, 2026, was created with a purpose that differs significantly from traditional political films, celebrity biographies, or investigative exposés. Rather than seeking to persuade, accuse, or defend, the film positions itself as a cinematic portrait of presence, an exploration of what it means to exist within extreme visibility while maintaining personal silence. Its core purpose is not to explain Melania Trump, but to observe her, and through that observation, invite viewers to reflect on modern power, image, and identity. One of the primary purposes of Melania, 2026, is to challenge the conventional structure of biographical documentaries. Most documentaries centered on public figures rely heavily on interviews, narration, expert commentary, and chronological exposition. This film intentionally minimizes those elements. There is little direct explanation, few emotional confessions, and almost no external analysis. By stripping away traditional storytelling tools, the documentary reframes biography as experience rather than information. The purpose is not to tell viewers what to think about Melania Trump, but to place them alongside her, inside rooms, moments, and transitions, allowing interpretation to emerge naturally. In doing so, the film questions whether a public figure must always be explained to be understood. Another central purpose of the documentary is to humanize Melania Trump without resorting to emotional manipulation. The film does not attempt to generate sympathy through dramatic backstories or hardship narratives. Instead, it presents her daily reality with restraint and dignity. By focusing on routine actions, walking through halls, preparing for appearances, observing events, the documentary highlights the humanity embedded in repetition and responsibility. This approach suggests that humanity does not require confession or vulnerability to be visible. The purpose here is subtle, to show that emotional distance does not equate to emotional absence. Silence is one of the most striking elements of Melania, 2026, and its use is deeply purposeful. In a media environment dominated by constant commentary, the documentary treats silence as a deliberate form of agency. Melania Trump has long been characterized publicly as reserved or withdrawn. The film does not attempt to correct or deny this perception. Instead, it reframes silence as a strategic and personal choice. The purpose is to explore how silence can function as a form of self-protection, a boundary against intrusion, a method of control in chaotic environments. By allowing silence to dominate the film's rhythm, the documentary invites viewers to reconsider cultural assumptions that equate visibility with expression and speech with authenticity. Another major purpose of the documentary is to examine the emotional and psychological cost of constant public exposure. Rather than addressing criticism directly, the film visually represents the weight of scrutiny through framing, space, and pacing. Large rooms, long corridors, and distant camera angles are used repeatedly to emphasize isolation within grandeur. This visual language serves a clear purpose, to show how prominence can amplify solitude rather than connection. The documentary suggests that the more visible a person becomes, the less room they may have for personal interiority. Although Melania Trump is inseparable from political history, the documentary's purpose is not political advocacy or critique. The film deliberately avoids policy discussion, ideological debate, or partisan framing. This creative choice serves a broader purpose, to separate personal identity from political symbolism. Melania is presented not as a political actor, but as an individual occupying a politically charged role. The documentary explores what happens when a person becomes a symbol, how personal intention is often overridden by public projection. By doing so, the film raises a broader question relevant beyond its subject: how much of any public figure belongs to themselves once they become a symbol? One of the documentary's more nuanced purposes is to reposition fashion as a legitimate narrative and communicative tool. Clothing is not treated as superficial or decorative. Instead, it is framed as an extension of diplomacy, self-expression, and defense. The documentary shows how fashion operates within strict codes of expectation while still allowing subtle individuality. This emphasis serves a larger purpose, to validate nonverbal communication in environments where speech is limited or risky. Through this lens, fashion becomes a form of authorship. The documentary suggests that when verbal narrative is constrained, visual presentation becomes a powerful substitute. A significant underlying purpose of Melania, 2026, is to resist media simplification. Public discourse often reduces complex individuals to single traits or narratives. The documentary pushes back against this tendency by refusing to define Melania Trump through any singular label, whether victim, accomplice, icon, or enigma. Instead of offering resolution, the film embraces ambiguity. This is a purposeful rejection of easy conclusions. The documentary implies that complexity itself deserves space, even if it frustrates audience expectations. The film also serves as a commentary on gendered expectations in public life, particularly for women adjacent to power. Melania Trump is shown navigating expectations of elegance, loyalty, composure, and silence, expectations rarely imposed equally on male counterparts. Without overt commentary, the documentary highlights how women in such roles are judged as symbols rather than individuals. The purpose is not to argue explicitly, but to reveal these dynamics through lived experience and visual context. Another important purpose of the documentary lies in its ethical stance toward observation. The camera never appears intrusive or confrontational. This restraint mirrors Melania's own guarded presence and suggests a mutual respect between subject and filmmaker. This approach raises questions about authorship and control in documentary filmmaking. Who controls the narrative when the subject chooses restraint? The documentary's answer seems to be that control itself becomes part of the story. At its core, Melania, 2026, functions as a meditation on the gap between image and inner reality. The documentary does not attempt to bridge this gap. Instead, it highlights it. The purpose is not to resolve the tension between public perception and private experience, but to show that such tension is unavoidable in modern public life. The film suggests that authenticity does not require full transparency, and that privacy can coexist with public responsibility. Perhaps one of the most controversial purposes of the documentary is its refusal to pass moral judgment. The film neither condemns nor celebrates its subject. This neutrality is intentional and risky. By withholding judgment, the documentary forces the audience to confront their own assumptions and biases. It becomes a mirror rather than a verdict. The purpose is not to absolve or accuse, but to complicate. Ultimately, the documentary's purpose is to create interpretive space. Viewers are not told what to feel, think, or conclude. Instead, they are invited to observe and reflect. This open-ended structure transforms the documentary from a statement into a question. What do we expect from public figures, and why? The purpose of Melania, 2026, is not to redefine Melania Trump in the public imagination, but to slow the gaze, to resist spectacle, and to reclaim silence as meaningful. It exists to remind viewers that visibility does not equal accessibility, and that some stories are told through restraint rather than revelation. In an era dominated by outrage, oversharing, and constant commentary, Melania, 2026, stands as a deliberate counterpoint. Its purpose is not to dominate discourse, but to disrupt it quietly, inviting contemplation instead of reaction. Whether audiences find this approach profound or evasive, the documentary succeeds in one essential goal: it forces viewers to reconsider how they consume images of power, identity, and humanity.